When my aunt looked me straight in the eye and told me, "You will never be part of this family legacy," I didn't cry. I laughed. Loud, bitter, and so sharp it echoed off her marble office walls. But back then I didn't know the full story, the cruel twist waiting 15 years down the line. For context, my name is Alara, 29 years old, and until recently, I was the invisible shadow in a family that never wanted me. My parents died in a car accident when I was 11, leaving me orphaned. My father's sister, Aunt Victoria, took me in not out of love but duty. That much was clear from the first day I stepped into her mansion. Aunt Victoria was everything my mother wasn't: severe, brilliant in business, and utterly obsessed with legacy. She ran Vancroft and Company, a prestigious interior design firm she'd inherited from my grandfather. My cousin, her only son Nathan, was crowned heir from the moment he could walk. Meanwhile, I was the charity case sleeping in the spare room. Even as a kid, I noticed the differences. Nathan got tutoring, private art classes, trips abroad to study design trends. I got ignored. If I asked a question about the business, Victoria's lips would tighten like I'd spat on the family crest. "You wouldn't understand, darling," she'd say coolly. "This is for blood." I wasn't blood enough. My father had been adopted, technically. That loophole became my curse. But I kept my head down. I studied hard, graduated with honors in business administration, hoping, maybe stupidly, that Aunt Victoria would notice me. By 24, I was managing small projects on the side while Nathan officially joined Vancroft and Company as creative director. That was when things started to crack. Nathan was talented, sure. But he was reckless, burning through budgets, showing up late, dating clients. Quietly, I saw the numbers slipping. I offered ideas, suggested more sustainable designs. Victoria shut me down every time. "Let Nathan handle it," she'd snap. "You wouldn't get it." It wasn't until I walked into the office one Sunday morning that everything truly shifted. Nathan had thrown a party the night before in the main showroom. There was wine spilled on imported silk wallpaper. Someone had broken a priceless antique vase. And Nathan? He was passed out on the velvet sofa, reeking of alcohol. That morning I didn't bother waking him. I went straight to Aunt Victoria's office. For the first time I laid it all out: his mismanagement, the debts piling up, the silent calls from investors. She listened in silence, her fingers steepled under her chin. And then she said it. "Alara, I appreciate your concern. But Nathan is my son. This company is for him. Not you. Never you." That was the first time she said it to my face. I left. Moved out. Got a job at a smaller firm across town. I told myself I was done with the Vancroft mess. Fast forward 5 years. I was 29. Settled. Dating a good man, Marcus, who worked in finance. Then out of nowhere I got a call. From Aunt Victoria. First I didn't pick up. Then curiosity got the better of me. Her voice was thin. Tired. "Alara," she said. "I need to talk to you." It turned out Nathan had run the company into the ground. Not just mismanagement, invested in crypto scams, taken out huge loans under the company's name. Vancroft and Company was on the brink of bankruptcy. A tiny, cruel part of me wanted to laugh. But I couldn't. That place had been my home, even if no one saw me there. I met Aunt Victoria at her house. She was thinner now, her hair streaked with gray, but still proud. We sat in silence until she spoke. "I need your help." I should have felt victorious. I didn't. "Why me?" I asked bluntly. "Nathan is your blood." That was when she said the thing that floored me. "Nathan's gone. He left for Bali last month. I don't know if he's coming back." I froze. Her only son had abandoned her. And now she turned to me. I wish that had been the end of the story. But life apparently had one more knife to twist. 3 months after I agreed to consult for her help stabilize things, I found out she wasn't handing the company over to me. No. She'd signed it over to someone else. Her ex-lover, Charles DeWitt. Charles DeWitt. The same man who, 15 years earlier, had stolen millions from Vancroft and Company, nearly destroying it. The scandal that haunted my childhood. I learned this from Marcus. His firm handled some of the company's remaining assets. First I thought it was a joke. Or maybe Charles had forced her hand somehow. But no. When I confronted Aunt Victoria, her face was calm, resolute. "Charles knows the business," she said simply. "He's the only one who can save it." I stared at her. "You'd rather trust the man who betrayed you than me?" Her mouth twitched. He may have betrayed me, but he's still more capable than someone who isn't family. That word again. Family. That was the day I truly walked away. But before I left, I asked her one final thing. If blood means so much to you, I said, then tell me, did it save you from being abandoned? From being ruined? For the first time I saw her hesitate. Her answer? Silence. I haven't spoken to her since. But sometimes late at night, I wonder what legacy really means. If it's about blood or about loyalty. About who stays when everything else burns down. And I wonder if Aunt Victoria ever looks at the ashes she chose to keep. It had been 6 months since I last saw Aunt Victoria. In that time, I built something of my own. I co-founded a boutique design firm with Marcus and 2 other friends from my university days. We weren't Bancroft and Company. We didn't have marble showrooms or glossy magazine covers. But we had something that felt solid, honest. Real. Then, one cold February afternoon, while I was reviewing mood boards with a client, Marcus texted me. Marcus, you need to see this. It was a link to a news article. My chest tightened. Former design titan Bancroft and Company declares bankruptcy after scandal. I skimmed it, heart pounding. Charles DeWitt had been caught embezzling again. Over the past 4 months, he had drained the last of Bancroft's accounts, including the employee pension fund. I read it twice. My hands shook. I wasn't sure if it was anger, shock, or something else entirely. The article mentioned that Aunt Victoria was under investigation, but wasn't expected to face charges. Nathan was unreachable. Later that night, Marcus found me standing in the kitchen, staring at the wall like it might offer me answers. He put a hand on my shoulder. You okay? I didn't answer right away. Then I said she did all of this. For nothing. She gave everything to him. And he did it again. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that surprised me. Maybe she always knew he'd betray her again. I frowned. Why would she do it then? He shrugged. Sometimes pride makes people cling to things, even when it's stupid. Family, love, legacy, whatever it is. They'd rather lose everything than admit they were wrong. That thought stuck with me. The next morning, I found myself driving toward Victoria's mansion. I didn't call first. I wasn't sure I would have come if I'd stopped to think about it too long. When I arrived, I saw something that knocked the wind out of me. The house was for sale. A giant real estate banner flapped in the cold wind, obscuring part of the front lawn. I parked, walked up to the front door, and knocked. There was no answer. But as I turned to leave, I heard footsteps. The door opened a crack. Aunt Victoria stood there. She looked old, smaller, like someone had taken the steel out of her bones. Her hair wasn't styled. She wore a simple gray sweater instead of her usual sharp suits. Elara, she said, voice hoarse. Why are you here? I saw the news. Her lips pressed together. Her eyes darted toward the street as if she were embarrassed to be seen by me. Come in, she said finally, opening the door wider. Inside, the house felt hollow. Most of the art was gone from the walls. The grand piano in the sitting room was covered with a sheet. We sat in the kitchen. No coffee, no tea. Just silence. Finally, I spoke. Why Victoria? I asked quietly. Why him? Her eyes flicked toward me. You wouldn't understand. I might, I said. Try me. For a long moment, she didn't say anything. Then she did something I'd never seen her do before. She slumped forward, resting her elbows on the table like the weight was finally too much. When I was younger, she began, voice barely above a whisper, before your father was adopted, I loved Charles. Stupidly. Completely. We built Bancroft together in those days. I thought he was brilliant. I stayed silent, letting her speak. When he stole from me, it wasn't just money. It was like he'd stolen the future I saw for myself. But the worst part. Her eyes met mine then. And for the first time, I didn't see the Ice Queen. I saw a woman broken by her own choices. The worst part was realizing I'd given him everything, and there was nothing left of me without that business. Or him. So why trust him again? I asked. My voice cracked. Why not me? Her face twisted. Regret? Maybe? I couldn't see you, she said finally. Every time I looked at you, I saw my failures. My mistakes. You were proof I wasn't as in control as I thought. That hurt more than I expected. Do you know, I said quietly, How many nights I stayed up wishing you'd see me? Really see me? I wasn't asking for everything. Just something. Silence hung between us like fog. Finally, Aunt Victoria whispered, I know. That was it. I left not long after. No dramatic goodbye. No forgiveness speech. But something had shifted. 2 weeks later, I got a letter. Handwritten. From Victoria. It wasn't an apology, not exactly. Just a simple statement. The house sold. I'm moving to a smaller place. I'll be okay. If you ever want to talk, you know where to find me. That letter sits in my desk drawer now. I haven't written back yet. Maybe I will someday. But for now, I'm building something that's mine. Not out of pride. Not out of legacy. Just because I can. And if there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that family isn't always about blood. Sometimes it's about who stays when everything else falls apart. That, I've learned, is the real legacy. Spring arrived quietly that year, slipping in without fanfare. I didn't expect my phone to ring one rainy Sunday morning while I was sketching layouts at the kitchen table. But it did. An unfamiliar number flashed across the screen. My first instinct was to ignore it, but something, maybe curiosity, maybe a faint echo of the past, made me swipe to answer. Alara speaking. A woman's voice replied. Tight. Professional. Miss Alara Vancroft? I don't use that name anymore, I said automatically. My legal name was still Alara Vale, my birth name before Victoria had ever entered the picture. My apologies, the voice said, then continued. I'm calling on behalf of Ward and Associates. We represent the creditors handling the Vancroft estate bankruptcy proceedings. There's a matter regarding remaining personal property. Items left in storage that legally default to you as the next of kin. I blinked. Next of kin? Yes, ma'am. Since Ms. Victoria Vancroft has formally renounced claim to all remaining assets. I almost dropped the phone. Renounced? Victoria Vancroft walking away from anything felt impossible. The woman gave me an address to collect the items. A storage unit out in Queens. I made myself write it down before the call ended. For a full hour I just sat at the table staring at that scrap of paper. When Marcus got home from his morning run, he found me there, still holding the pen. What's up? He asked, pulling off his jacket. I told him. He frowned. You want me to come with you? No, I said, standing up slowly. I think I need to do this on my own. The storage unit was exactly what I expected. Gray concrete, cold fluorescent lights, rows upon rows of locked metal doors. The Manadra board-looking guy with the clipboard led me to Unit 304 and handed me the key. It's paid up for another 6 months, he said, yawning. After that, it's your call. I slid the key into the lock, heart pounding like I was opening some kind of time capsule. Inside there wasn't much. A few battered furniture pieces. An old drafting table. Rolls of fabric samples wrapped in plastic. And in the far corner, a stack of file boxes. The moment I saw them, something in my chest tightened. I spent the next 3 hours sitting on the cold floor of that storage unit, sorting through box after box. Old company records. Handwritten notes from Victoria. Photographs I didn't even know existed of my father, young and smiling, standing beside her at some long-forgotten gala. But it wasn't until the last box that I found something that really stopped me. A leather-bound journal. At first glance it looked like any old notebook. But when I opened it, I recognized Victoria's handwriting instantly. The first entry was dated almost 20 years ago. March 3rd. Charles left today. I told everyone it didn't matter. That I would rebuild without him. But I don't know if I believe it. Nathan's too young to take over. And Alara. Alara's just a child. I kept reading. Entry after entry. Quiet admissions she never would have said aloud. Her doubts. Her regrets. The slow erosion of the image she built for the world. And sprinkled through it all mentions of me. Small things. Alara stayed up late again, drawing floor plans. She's talented. But I can't afford another distraction. Sometimes I wonder if she notices how little I include her. I see the way she looks at Nathan. Envious. Or maybe just lonely. One line scrawled messily across an entire page made my breath catch. If I had done things differently, maybe Alara would have been my real legacy. I closed the journal, my hands trembling. For years I told myself I didn't care what Victoria thought. That I didn't need her approval or her love. But here in her own words, she'd confess what I'd always suspected but never dared believe. She had seen me. Not as a threat. Not as a burden. But as someone who could have been more. I didn't cry. But for the first time in a long time, my chest felt lighter. I packed the journal in my bag, locked the storage unit, and stepped back out into the afternoon sun. Later that week, I wrote Victoria a letter. Just a short one. I found your journal. Thank you for keeping it. I think I understand now. If you ever want to talk, my door's open. I didn't know if she'd reply. But it felt right sending it. 2 weeks passed. Life moved forward. My firm landed its biggest contract yet, a full redesign for a historic hotel downtown. Things were good. And then on a quiet Friday evening, my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I hesitated. Picked up. Ilara. Victoria's voice. Hoarse. Older. But unmistakably her. I got your letter, she said after a moment. I wasn't sure you'd respond. I wasn't sure I should, she admitted. Then softer, but I wanted to hear your voice again. Silence stretched. Finally I said, are you okay? A humorless laugh. That depends on how you define okay. We talked for almost an hour. About nothing and everything. Old stories. My father. Business. Life. At one point she said, I heard about your firm. Congratulations. Thank you, I said, voice tight. I think I learned a lot from you in the end. Another pause. Then, I'm proud of you, Ilara. Those words hit harder than I expected. When we finally hung up, I sat there for a long time just holding the phone. I didn't know if we'd ever fully repair what had been broken between us. Maybe some things were too fractured to completely fix. But there was something comforting in knowing we'd both survived. And maybe, just maybe, we were both ready to build something new. Not from blood. Not from legacy. But from choice. Because family isn't always the people you're born to. Sometimes it's the people who choose to stay. Even after everything else falls apart. The following autumn, I received an invitation in the mail. A simple cream envelope. No company logo or official seal. Just my name in careful handwriting. Inside was a single card. You're invited to the opening of Betrayal Atelier. Saturday, 7 p.m. Lower Manhattan. At the bottom in smaller script. I hope you'll come. Victoria. Betrayal Atelier. I stared at it, heart pounding. Victoria had said she was done with the business world. That she had renounced her past life. But here she was building something new. And using my name as part of it. Valamy, real last name. That Saturday, Marcus and I arrived just after 7. The address led us to a restored brick building tucked between high-end boutiques and art galleries. Inside, the space was stunning. Warm oak floors, high ceilings, exposed beams. Display walls lined with curated design pieces, furniture, textiles, art. It wasn't flashy. It was personal. Intimate. I spotted Victoria standing by a corner table, speaking with a guest. She looked different. Softer somehow. Still elegant, but less severe. Her sharp suits had been replaced by a simple black dress. When she saw me, her expression faltered for a second. Then she smiled. Ilara, she said quietly. You came. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak right away. We stood there for a long moment, neither of us quite sure how to bridge the gap between past and present. Finally, I asked, this is yours. Victoria shook her head slowly. Ours. I couldn't do it alone. I asked a few of my old team to come back. And some new faces too. I glanced around the room. Young designers mingling with veterans. Old friends reunited with hesitant smiles. This time, Victoria added, voice steady, I'm not trying to build an empire. Just a space where things can grow. Where talent doesn't get ignored. My throat tightened. I understood now why she'd invited me. It wasn't about legacy anymore. It was about making things right. Toward the end of the night, as the crowd thinned, Victoria and I found ourselves standing by a window overlooking the street. The city lights glowed gold and silver in the distance. I used to think, Victoria said suddenly, that control was everything. That if I could just keep my grip tight enough, nothing could fall apart. She turned to me, eyes clearer than I'd ever seen them. But I was wrong. Sometimes you have to let go before you can really hold on to anything. I nodded slowly. I know, I said quietly. Outside, the rain had started again, soft and steady against the glass. And for the first time in years, standing beside the woman who had once been both my greatest obstacle and my closest family, I felt something like peace. We didn't need to say anything else. Because in that silence I understood we'd both changed. Not because of blood. Not because of shared history. But because we'd chosen to. And that choice, quiet, deliberate, human, was worth more than any inheritance ever could be. A year later, I stood in the same window again. Only this time, it was my name on the plaque out front, Elara Veil Design. My own studio. Victoria had stepped back, fully this time. V Veil Atelier continued under new management while I branched off into my own independent work. We kept in touch. Dinners. Occasional long phone calls. No bitterness. No ghosts. Just two women finally understanding each other. And every so often, I'd find myself thinking back to the girl I'd once been, the one desperate for approval, desperate to belong. I think she'd be proud. Not because of what I built, but because I'd finally learned. You don't have to inherit a legacy to create one. Sometimes the best things are the ones you build with your own two hands. And sometimes family isn't where you start. It's where you choose to end up.